cursed Lycan king took one look, then growled, "She's mine," a command no one dared challenge. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The first time Lucius Gravesend laid eyes on Ravenna Ironheart, the world stopped breathing. The ancient hall of Blackmoor Castle fell silent as his amber eyes, burning with a fire that had consumed kingdoms, locked onto the woman standing in the doorway. She wore no crown, no jewels, no armor, just a simple dress the color of winter wheat, and hair like spun gold that caught the torchlight and held it captive. But it was not her beauty that made the Lycan King's breath catch in his throat. It was the way she looked at him, without fear, without reverence, as if she could see straight through the beast to the man buried beneath centuries of darkness. His hand tightened on the arm of his throne, claws extending involuntarily as an ancient recognition flooded his veins like liquid fire. The words tore from his throat, raw and absolute, a sound that was more growl than speech. "She's mine." The declaration echoed through the stone chamber, and every creature in the room, from the highest warrior to the lowest servant, felt the weight of destiny shift. No one dared challenge him. No one would ever dare. Ravenna stood perfectly still, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. She had been brought here as a peace offering, a sacrifice from her village to appease the cursed king who ruled the northern territories with an iron fist and a wolf's fury. They had told her stories since childhood. Stories of Lucius Gravesend, the man who had been cursed by a vengeful witch 300 years ago, condemned to walk the earth as something between human and beast, watching everyone he loved turn to dust while he remained unchanged, unchained to time, but shackled to immortality. They said he had grown cold, that his heart had turned to stone, that he took pleasure only in conquest and control. They said he was a monster. But as she met his gaze across the expanse of that throne room, she saw something the stories had never mentioned. She saw loneliness so deep, it had carved canyons in his soul. The king rose from his throne with the fluid grace of a predator, his massive frame casting shadows that seemed to move independently in the flickering light. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of his cursed kingdom. His long black hair fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed, matching the thick beard that framed a face too beautiful to be entirely human. He was all sharp angles and fierce lines, a sculpture carved from darkness and fury. But his eyes, those burning amber eyes, held something fragile in their depths as he descended the stone steps toward her. The crowd parted without a word, and Ravenna felt the air grow heavy with anticipation, with fear, with something electric that made her skin tingle. "Are you frightened?" His voice was deep, rough, like gravel and smoke, but there was an unexpected gentleness beneath the rawness that caught her off guard. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the scent of winter forests and ancient earth that clung to him. She could have lied, should have lied, but something in his gaze demanded honesty, and Ravenna found herself giving it. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs, "but not of you." His head tilted slightly, confusion flickering across his fierce features. Then of what? Of this, of destiny, of losing myself before I even know who I am. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, something shifted in his expression, something almost like recognition, as if she had spoken a truth he had carried silently for centuries. Lucius reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, to run, to reject him as so many had before. But Ravenna stood her ground, watching as his large, calloused hand came to rest against her cheek. His palm was warm, his touch surprisingly gentle for someone with such obvious strength. When his thumb brushed across her cheekbone, she felt a tremor run through him, as if even this simple contact was more than he had allowed himself to feel in lifetimes. "You are not a prisoner here," he said, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. The fierce king of moments ago had vanished, replaced by something more human, more vulnerable. "I will not force you to stay, but I am asking." The rawness in his words, the desperate hope barely contained beneath them, struck something deep within Ravena's chest. She had been prepared for a monster. She had not been prepared for this. The days that followed were strange and surreal, like walking through a dream where reality shifted with every breath. Lucius kept his word. She was given her own chambers in the Western Tower, rooms filled with soft furs and warming fires, with windows that looked out over forests that stretched endlessly toward mountains crowned with eternal snow. He did not summon her, did not demand her presence, did not exercise the claim he had made so publicly. Instead, he waited. She would see him in the corridors sometimes, surrounded by his warriors and advisors, his face a mask of stone, his voice cold and commanding as he dealt with matters of state and conflict. In those moments, he was every inch the feared Lycan king, a creature of absolute authority, whose word was law and whose displeasure meant death. But when he caught sight of her, something would soften in his expression, just for a heartbeat, before he turned away as if afraid his attention might burn her. Ravenna spent those early days observing, learning the rhythms of the castle and the man who ruled it. She watched him train with his warriors in the courtyard, his movements fluid and deadly, his strength terrifying even in human form. He fought with a precision that spoke of centuries of practice, disarming opponents with ease, his long black hair whipping around him like a dark halo. But she also noticed the way he held back, the careful control he maintained even in combat, as if constantly aware of his own capacity for destruction. After each session, he would stand alone while his warriors dispersed, his chest heaving, sweat glistening on his skin, and she could see the weight of isolation settle over him like a familiar cloak. He had lived so long among people yet remained utterly apart from them, and the loneliness of it made her heart ache. She began leaving small things for him to find. A book of poetry on his desk, with a passage marked that reminded her of something he had said. A rare flower from the gardens placed on the windowsill of his study. A carefully folded note, with nothing but a simple observation about the sunset she had watched that evening. At first, she was not sure he even noticed. But then she began finding responses. The book returned to her chambers with different passages marked, his handwriting bold and sure in the margins. A matching flower appeared beside her breakfast plate one morning. Notes written in that same strong hand, sharing his own thoughts, his own observations, building a conversation between them that felt safer somehow than speaking face to face. Through these small exchanges, Ravenna began to understand the depth of the man beneath the legend. He was well-read, thoughtful, possessed of a dry wit that surprised her. He noticed everything, remembered details she had mentioned in passing, asked questions that showed genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. One afternoon, she encountered him in the castle library, a vast room filled with books collected over 3 centuries. He was standing by a window, a leather-bound volume in his hands, sunlight streaming through the glass and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air around him. For a moment, he looked almost peaceful, the harsh lines of his face softened by concentration. When he sensed her presence and looked up, she saw surprise flicker across his features, followed quickly by that now familiar expression of cautious hope. "I did not know anyone else used this room," he said quietly. "Most find it too dusty, too filled with old things." Ravenna moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his admission. "I have always believed that old things have the most interesting stories," she replied. "And besides, the best treasures are often hidden in places others overlook." His amber eyes studied her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Is that why you stay? Because you see me as a treasure hidden in dust and shadow?" There was no accusation in his tone, only genuine curiosity mixed with disbelief, as if he could not fathom why anyone would choose to remain with him. Ravenna chose her words carefully, knowing they mattered. "I stay because you gave me the choice to leave, and that gift means more than you know. I stay because I see a man fighting to retain his humanity against impossible odds. I stay because when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. And yes, I stay because I believe there is treasure here worth discovering, if you will let me." Lucius set down the book with trembling hands, his jaw working as he struggled with emotions that had been locked away for lifetimes. "I do not know how to do this," he admitted, his voice rough with rawness. "I have forgotten how to let someone close. I am afraid of what the beast might do, of the darkness inside me, of hurting you even when I am trying to protect you." Ravenna closed the distance between them until she could place her hand over his heart, feeling its wild rhythm beneath her palm. "Then we will learn together," she said softly. "You can teach me about your world, your burden, your centuries of experience. And I can teach you that it is possible to be vulnerable without being weak, to trust without losing control, to love without losing yourself." His hand came up to cover hers, holding it against his chest as if it were a lifeline. "You make it sound simple," he murmured. "But what if I fail? What if the curse wins, or the beast takes over, or I become the monster everyone fears?" She looked up at him with unwavering certainty. "Then I will remind you who you are. I will fight for you, the way you have fought for your humanity all these years. You do not have to carry this burden alone anymore, Lucius. Not if you do not want to." Something broke open in him at those words. He pulled her into his arms, not with passion, but with desperate need for connection, for comfort, for the simple human warmth of another person who saw him and chose not to run. He buried his face in her hair, his large frame shaking slightly, and she realized with a start that he was crying. Silent tears that spoke of centuries of held-back emotion, of pain endured alone, of hope deferred so long it had almost died. She held him through it, this powerful king who ruled nations and commanded armies, letting him be simply a man who had suffered and survived, and was finally allowing himself to feel the weight of it all. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's presence, the library silent around them except for the gentle sound of pages turning in the wind from the open window. It was not dramatic or grand, but it was real, and it was the moment when Lucius began to truly believe that perhaps he could have this. Perhaps he could have her. After that day, things shifted between them. Lucius began seeking her out more openly, no longer content with stolen glances and hidden notes. He invited her to walk with him through the gardens he tended, showing her the rare plants he had collected from around the world, explaining their properties and origins with an enthusiasm that revealed a softer side he rarely displayed. He taught her to play chess, and she delighted in the way his eyes lit up when she made a clever move, the rare smile that curved his lips when she surprised him. They spent evenings in his study, her reading while he worked through correspondence, the simple companionship of shared space becoming its own form of intimacy. And slowly, carefully, he began to tell her his story, not all at once, but in pieces, fragments of memory shared in quiet moments when the walls between them came down. It was on the 5th night that Ravenna went looking for him. She had spent days wandering the castle, learning its secrets, speaking with the servants who regarded her with a mixture of awe and pity. They told her things, that the king rarely slept, that he walked the battlements alone when the moon was full, fighting the beast within him, that he had not allowed anyone close in over a century, not since the last person he loved had aged and died in his arms, leaving him more alone than ever. The stories painted a picture of a man trapped in his own existence, and Ravenna found herself aching for him in ways she could not explain. She found him exactly where the servants said he would be, standing on the highest battlement, his dark silhouette framed against a sky scattered with stars. The wind whipped his long hair around his face, and even from a distance, she could see the tension in his powerful frame, as if he were holding himself together through sheer force of will. She approached slowly, her footsteps silent on the stone. When she stood beside him, close enough to touch but not touching, he spoke without looking at her. "You should not be here. It is not safe." "From what?" she asked, her own voice barely carrying over the wind. "From you?" He turned then, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. There was such hunger there, such desperate longing mixed with equally desperate restraint. "Yes," he said simply. "From me. The curse, it is strongest when the moon is full. The beast wants what it wants, and I cannot always control it." Ravenna felt her heart squeeze at the pain in his admission. "And what does it want?" His jaw clenched, muscles working beneath his beard. "You. It wants you, and so do I. But I will not take what is not freely given, even if it destroys me. Ravenna stepped closer, eliminating the space between them, until she could feel his warmth, his strength, the barely leashed power that thrummed through him like a living thing. Then perhaps, she said softly, you should ask me what I want. Lucius looked down at her, and she saw the moment hope and fear collided in his expression. What do you want, Ravenna Ironheart? She reached up, her small hand coming to rest over his heart, feeling the wild thunder of it beneath her palm. I want to understand. I want to know the man beneath the curse. I want to not be afraid of what I feel when I look at you. His hand covered hers, dwarfing it, holding it against his chest as if it were something precious and fragile. And what do you feel? Everything, she whispered. Everything I was not supposed to feel. The dam broke. Lucius pulled her against him with a growl that was pure relief, pure need, his arms wrapping around her as if she might disappear if he did not hold tight enough. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in, and she felt the tremor that ran through his entire body. Ravenna, he murmured against her temple, his voice broken and beautiful. You have no idea what you do to me, how you have undone 3 centuries of carefully constructed walls in a matter of days. She turned in his arms, looking up at him, seeing him fully for the first time. The fierce king, the cursed beast, the lonely man, all of him. Then show me, she said. Show me who you are. And for the first time in longer than memory, Lucius Gravesend allowed himself to be seen. What followed was a revelation. In the privacy of those moonlit moments, Lucius transformed. The cold, commanding king who terrified his enemies and ruled with absolute authority became someone else entirely with her. He showed her the man he had been before the curse, the young warrior with dreams and hopes, and a capacity for love so deep it had survived 300 years of darkness. He spoke to her in that rough, gentle voice, telling her stories of ages past, of battles fought and kingdoms won and lost. He showed her the scars on his body, each one a memory, a moment frozen in time. And when she traced them with her fingers, learning the map of his pain, he shuddered beneath her touch, as if she were healing wounds that had never properly closed. With her, he was tender. With her, he was careful. With her, he was finally, blessedly, allowed to be human. Ravenna discovered her own transformation happening in parallel. She had come to Blackmoor Castle expecting to lose herself, to become merely an extension of a powerful king's will. Instead, she found herself growing stronger, more confident, more fully realized than she had ever been. Lucius did not diminish her. He elevated her. He asked her opinion on matters of state, genuinely listening when she offered perspective. He encouraged her to speak freely, to challenge him when she disagreed, to never hide her thoughts or feelings for fear of his reaction. When she expressed interest in learning to defend herself, he personally taught her, patient and thorough, never condescending, always respectful of her progress. When she mentioned wanting to understand the kingdom's economy, he brought her into meetings with his advisors, supporting her questions and validating her contributions. He treated her not as a possession to be protected, but as a partner to be respected. And in doing so, he helped her discover strengths she had not known she possessed. But there were difficult moments too, times when the weight of the curse pressed down on Lucius with crushing force. Ravenna learned to recognize the signs, the way his jaw would tighten, his hands curling into fists as he fought for control, the distant look in his eyes as if he were somewhere else, somewhere dark. The sudden need to be alone, to put distance between himself and everyone around him before the beast could emerge. The first time she witnessed a full transformation was terrifying. She had heard him from her chambers, the sound of furniture breaking, of inhuman growls echoing through the stone corridors. Against the advice of the servants, she went to him, finding him in his private rooms, the space destroyed, and Lucius himself caught between forms, his body contorted, his features shifting between man and wolf, his eyes burning red with the beast's fury. She should have been afraid. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but instead, she saw his pain, the way he was fighting himself, the torment written in every line of his distorted features. She approached slowly, speaking in a calm, steady voice, saying his name over and over like an anchor. "Lucius, I am here. You are not alone. Come back to me." At first, he did not seem to hear her, too lost in the battle raging within. But she persisted, moving closer, reaching out even as his claws extended, even as a growl rumbled from his chest. Her hand touched his face, and he froze. The contact seemed to shock him, seemed to cut through the red haze of the beast's control. His eyes met hers, and she saw the moment recognition dawned, the moment he truly saw her standing there, unafraid, unwavering. "Ravana," he gasped, his voice distorted but unmistakably his own. "Run, please. I cannot control it." But she did not run. She stepped closer instead, wrapping her arms around him as best she could, holding him through the tremors that racked his body. "I am not going anywhere," she whispered fiercely. "Fight it. I know you can. You are stronger than the curse, stronger than the beast. Come back to me." It took time, longer than any transformation before, but slowly, gradually, Lucius regained control. His body shifted back to human form, the red fading from his eyes until amber returned, his breathing evening out as the beast retreated. When he was fully himself again, he collapsed against her, exhausted and shaking. "I could have killed you," he said, horror thick in his voice. "I could have torn you apart without even realizing it." "Why did you not run?" Ravenna held him tighter, her own hands trembling now that the danger had passed. "Because running would have meant abandoning you to face that darkness alone," she said simply. "And I will never do that. I told you, Lucius. You do not have to carry this burden by yourself anymore." He wept then, truly wept, the sound raw and broken and healing all at once. And she held him through it, this man who was so much more than the world knew, so much more than even he believed himself to be. After that night, something fundamental shifted between them. Lucius stopped trying to hide the worst parts of himself from her, stopped pretending the curse was something he had completely mastered. He let her see his struggles, his failures, his fears, and in doing so, he discovered that vulnerability did not make him weaker. If anything, it made him stronger, because he no longer had to expend energy maintaining a facade. Ravana, for her part, discovered reserves of courage she had not known she possessed. She learned to read his moods, to anticipate when he needed space, and when he needed presence, to push him when he was retreating too far into himself, and to provide comfort when he was overwhelmed. They developed a language between them, unspoken but understood, a way of communicating that transcended words. A look across a crowded room that said, "I see you." A touch on the arm that meant "I am here." A smile that conveyed "you are not alone." The castle began to notice the changes in their king. The servants whispered about how he seemed less cold, more present. His advisors remarked on his increased patience, his willingness to consider alternatives he might once have dismissed. His warriors saw the way he trained with renewed purpose, no longer fighting as if seeking an end, but fighting as if protecting something precious. And at the center of it all was Ravenna, the golden-haired woman who had walked into Blackmoor Castle as a sacrifice and emerged as a force of nature in her own right. She commanded respect not through fear or power, but through genuine care for the people around her. She learned their names, their stories, their struggles. She established programs to help the poor, mediated disputes with wisdom beyond her years, and slowly but surely won the hearts of a kingdom that had not known softness in far too long. But there were those who resented her presence, who saw her as a threat to the established order. Chief among them was Morrigan, one of Lucius's oldest advisors, a woman who had served him for over a century and had grown comfortable with her influence. She viewed Ravenna as an interloper, a temporary distraction who would ultimately prove unable to handle the realities of life with a cursed king. Morrigan began planting seeds of doubt wherever she could, subtle suggestions that perhaps Ravenna was not as devoted as she seemed, that perhaps she was merely playing a role to secure power, that perhaps she would leave at the first real test of her commitment. The whispers reached Lucius, and though he tried to dismiss them, Centuries of betrayal and loss made it difficult for him to fully trust in happiness. He had been hurt too many times, had watched too many people claim to love him, only to recoil when faced with the reality of what he was. Ravenna sensed his withdrawal, the way he began to pull back slightly, doubt creeping into his expression when he looked at her. It hurt, but she understood it. Trust was not built in days or even weeks. It was built through consistent action, through proving again and again that she meant what she said. So she did not confront him angrily or demand explanations. Instead, she simply continued being present, continued showing up, continued choosing him day after day. When Morrigan orchestrated a situation designed to make Ravenna appear disloyal, bringing forth a young nobleman who claimed Ravenna had been meeting him secretly, Ravenna did not panic or defend herself with desperate words. She simply looked at Lucius and said, "You know me. You know my heart. I will not beg you to believe me, because true trust is not something that can be begged for. It is either there or it is not. But know this, I have never lied to you, and I am not starting now. The nobleman is either mistaken or deliberately deceitful, and I leave it to you to determine which." Lucius stared at her for a long moment, the entire court watching in tense silence. She could see the war in his eyes, the old scars fighting against the new hope, the weight of centuries of disappointment pressing against the possibility that this time, this woman, was different. Then he turned to the nobleman with cold fury in his gaze. "You will tell me the truth," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous growl that made everyone in the room flinch. "And you will tell it now, because if I discover you have lied about my lady, if you have attempted to sow discord through deception, I will make you regret the day you learn to speak." The young man's composure crumbled under that withering stare, and the truth came tumbling out. Morrigan had paid him, promised him land and title if he would play this role, convinced the king that Ravenna was untrustworthy. The revelation sent shockwaves through the court, and Lucius's rage was a palpable thing, filling the room like a physical presence. But before he could pass judgment, Ravenna stepped forward, her hand on his arm staying his fury. She looked at Morrigan with something that was not quite pity, but close to it. "You fear change," she said quietly. "You fear that if the king is happy, if he finds peace, he will no longer need you. But power built on fear and isolation is not real power, Morrigan. It is a prison. And I do not seek to replace you or diminish your service. I seek only to give him what he has been denied for too long, the freedom to be more than just a king, more than just a curse. If you cannot accept that, then by all means, continue your schemes. But know that you are fighting not against me, but against his chance at happiness." Is that truly what centuries of loyalty have taught you to do? Morrigan's carefully constructed composure cracked, and for the first time in over a century, vulnerability showed in her ancient eyes. "You speak of things you do not understand," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I have served this kingdom, this king, for longer than you have been alive. I have watched him suffer betrayal after betrayal, loss after loss. And that service is honored and valued," Ravenna replied gently but firmly. "But service should not mean keeping him isolated in the name of protection. It should mean helping him grow, helping him find peace. Can you not see that he is happier now? More balanced? That his strength comes not from standing alone, but from having someone to stand with?" Morrigan looked at Lucius, really looked at him, and seemed to see for the first time the changes that had occurred. The way his posture was less rigid, his expression less cold, the way he no longer carried himself like a man waiting to be betrayed. After a long moment, she bowed her head in acknowledgement. "Perhaps I have been fighting the wrong battle," she admitted quietly. "Perhaps I forgot that loyalty means wanting what is best for those we serve, not what is easiest for us." Lucius, watching this exchange, felt something shift in his chest. Ravenna had done in moments what he could not have done in years. She had reached Morrigan not with threats or punishment, but with understanding and honesty. He made his judgment then, his voice firm but not cruel. "Morrigan, You have served me faithfully for over a century, and I will not forget that. But your actions here were unacceptable. You sought to undermine the woman I love, to create division where there should be unity. However, I also understand that change is difficult, especially when it upends everything familiar. So I give you a choice. You may leave this court with honor and generous compensation, free to live your remaining years in peace. Or you may stay, but you must accept that things have changed, that Ravenna is not just my consort but my partner, and that undermining her undermines me. Choose. Morrigan looked between them, saw the united front they presented, the love that bound them, and something in her ancient heart softened. If she will have me, she said slowly, I would stay, and I would learn from her, if she would teach me, how to let go of old fears, how to embrace new possibilities. Ravenna stepped forward and extended her hand. I would welcome that, she said simply. The resolution of the Morrigan situation became a turning point for the kingdom. Word spread that even the oldest, most set-in-their-ways members of the court could change, could grow, could be reached with patience and understanding rather than force. And Morrigan, true to her word, became one of Ravenna's strongest allies, her centuries of experience combined with Ravenna's fresh perspective, creating strategies that strengthened the realm in ways neither could have achieved alone. It was proof that transformation was possible at any age, that redemption was not just for the young, that the capacity for growth existed in even the most hardened hearts. Lucius watched this unfold with quiet awe, marveling at his wife's ability to turn potential enemies into allies, to see potential in people others had written off. She is remarkable, he said to Morrigan one day, and the old advisor nodded. That she is, Morrigan agreed. You chose well, my king. Better than you probably even knew at the time. But the world beyond their private moments did not stop turning. Lucius still ruled his kingdom with an iron fist, still commanded armies and made decisions that shaped the fate of thousands. Ravenna watched him navigate court politics with ruthless efficiency, saw him execute justice without mercy on those who threatened his people, witnessed the cold fury with which he dealt with traitors and enemies. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, a force of nature that could not be controlled or contained. But then he would find her, would seek her out in the library or the gardens, and the transformation would occur. His fierce expression would soften, his rigid posture would ease, and he would reach for her with hands that trembled slightly, as if he still could not quite believe she was real. The duality was intoxicating. The knowledge that this powerful, feared creature was devoted entirely to her, that she held the heart of a king who had not allowed himself to feel for lifetimes. The first time he kissed her, the world caught fire. They were in the castle gardens, surrounded by night-blooming flowers that filled the air with their sweet, heady perfume. He had been showing her the rare plants he cultivated himself, speaking about them with an unexpected passion, when she had laughed at something he said. The sound had stopped him mid-sentence, and he had stared at her with such intensity that her breath had caught. No one has made me laugh in 100 years, he said quietly. No one has made me want to. Before she could respond, his hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her lower lip with reverence. May I? He asked, his voice rough with need but his eyes seeking permission. Always seeking permission. She answered by rising on her toes, by closing the distance between them, by pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home and setting sail all at once. Lucius kissed her like a man starved, like someone drinking water after wandering a desert for lifetimes. His arms came around her, lifting her against him, and she could feel the barely restrained strength in his grip, the way he held back even in his passion. Always careful, always protective. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes closed, his expression one of pure, overwhelming emotion. I am yours, he whispered against her lips. Body, soul, beast, and man, for as long as you will have me, I am yours. Ravenna felt tears sting her eyes at the raw vulnerability in his words, at the gift he was giving her, his trust, his heart, his very self. And I am yours, she whispered back. no matter what comes. No matter what darkness we must face. I am yours, Lucius Gravesend. But darkness was indeed coming. Whispers began to spread through the kingdom, carried on the lips of those who envied the king's happiness, or feared the changes it might bring. The witch who had cursed Lucius 3 centuries ago had left a prophecy, one that had been nearly forgotten in the passage of time. Should the cursed king find true love, one that could see past the beast to the man, the curse would be tested. If the love proved false, he would be consumed entirely by the beast, losing his humanity forever. But if the love proved true, if it could withstand the ultimate trial, the curse would break. The problem was that no one knew what the ultimate trial would be, only that it would come, and that it would demand everything. The knowledge of the prophecy weighed heavily on both of them once they learned of it from an ancient text Ravenna discovered in the library. Lucius wanted to push her away, wanted to protect her from the danger that might come, wanted to shield her from the possibility of watching him lose himself completely to the beast. "I will not risk you," he told her fiercely one night, his hands gripping her shoulders as desperation filled his eyes. "If the trial comes and I fail, if I become the monster permanently, I could not bear knowing you witnessed it. You should leave. Go far from here where you will be safe." But Ravenna stood firm, her own hands coming up to frame his face, forcing him to look at her, to see the determination in her eyes. "Do you not understand yet?" she asked, her voice shaking not with fear but with intensity. "I am not here because it is safe. I am not here because it is easy. I am here because choosing you, choosing us, is the most important thing I will ever do. Whatever trial comes, we face it together. That is what love means, Lucius. Not running when things become difficult, but standing firm when everything tries to tear you apart." They spent the weeks after the discovery of the prophecy preparing in the only ways they knew how. Lucius trained harder, pushing his body and his control to their limits, determined to strengthen his hold over the beast. Ravenna studied every text she could find about curses and magic, looking for any clue about what might be coming, any way to tip the scales in their favor. But more than that, they simply loved each other, fiercely, completely, without holding back. They made every moment count, whether grand or small. Morning walks where they talked about everything and nothing. Stolen kisses in shadowed hallways. Nights spent wrapped in each other's arms, whispering promises and fears and hopes for a future they were not certain they would have. They built a foundation of memories and moments, creating something so strong that whatever came would have to fight through layers of devotion to tear them apart. During this time, Ravenna also worked to truly understand Lucius in all his complexity. She sat with him during difficult judgments, watching how he weighed justice against mercy, how he struggled with decisions that had no easy answers. She saw him comfort a child who had lost parents to war, his rough hands gentle as he knelt to the child's level, his voice soft as he promised protection. She witnessed him execute a traitor without hesitation, his face hard as stone, his sentence absolute, and understood that this too was part of who he was, someone who would do what was necessary, no matter how dark, to protect his people. The duality no longer seemed contradictory to her. It was simply the full truth of him, capable of great tenderness and great violence, both existing simultaneously, both equally real. And she loved all of it, all of him, the light and the shadow woven together into one complicated, beautiful whole. Lucius, in turn, discovered new depths to Ravenna. He watched her navigate complex political situations with a grace he had not expected, her ability to read people and situations proving invaluable. He saw her defend a servant who had been wrongly accused, standing up to a noble twice her size without flinching, her moral compass unwavering. He witnessed her sit with the sick in the castle infirmary, holding hands and offering comfort to those who had no one else, her compassion boundless. She was kind but not weak, gentle but not soft, empathetic but not naive. She saw the best in people but was not blind to their flaws. She believed in redemption, but understood that not everyone deserved it. She was, he realized with growing awe, everything he had never known to hope for. A partner who matched him in strength while tempering his harsher edges, who challenged him to be better while accepting him exactly as he was. The trial came on a night when the moon hung full and red in the sky like a bloodied coin. Ravenna woke to the sound of howling, a sound that raised every hair on her body and filled her with primal dread. She ran to find Lucius, her heart pounding, knowing with certainty that something was terribly wrong. She found him in the great hall, but he was not alone. Surrounding him were other Lycans, creatures from across the kingdom who had heard the call of the curse. They circled him like wolves around a wounded alpha, their eyes glowing in the darkness, their forms shifting between human and beast. And in the center, Lucius was losing his battle with the monster inside. His body was caught mid-transformation, his features warped, his amber eyes now burning red, his humanity slipping away with every passing second. The witch appeared then, materializing from shadows and smoke, her ancient face cruel with satisfaction. "This is the trial," she announced, her voice echoing through the hall. "The beast or the man? The curse demands a choice. He can surrender to the transformation, become the monster fully, and rule forever as an immortal beast with power beyond imagining. Or he can fight it, cling to his humanity, and risk death, because mortality is the price of being human, and he has lived far beyond his natural years. Choose, Lycan King, power and eternity, or love and death." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Ravenna felt her world tilt on its axis. She ran toward him, ignoring the other Lycans, ignoring the witch, seeing only Lucius struggling against his own nature. She reached him, her hands grasping his face, forcing him to look at her even as his features continued to shift and change. "Lucius," she said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. "Look at me. Stay with me. You are not the beast. You are not the curse. You are the man who showed me tenderness when the world expected cruelty. You are the king who ruled with justice tempered by mercy. You are mine, and I am yours, and that is stronger than any magic." His red eyes focused on her, and she saw the war raging behind them. The beast wanted to survive, wanted the power, wanted the immortality, but the man wanted her, wanted love, wanted to finally, after 300 years, be free. "Ravenna," he growled, his voice barely human. "If I choose you, I will die. Eventually, as all mortals do. I cannot protect you if I am dead. I cannot hold you. I cannot love you. Then we will have whatever time we are given," Ravenna said fiercely, her hands tightening on his face. "I would rather have one mortal lifetime with the man I love than an eternity with a beast who has forgotten how to feel. Choose life, Lucius. Choose love. Choose us." Something shifted in his expression, something fundamental and final. The red in his eyes began to fade, replaced slowly by the amber she knew, the amber she loved. His features began to smooth, to return to human form, and with each passing second, she could see him winning the battle. But she could also see the cost. Lines appeared at the corners of his eyes, strands of silver threaded through his black hair, his skin losing some of its supernatural vitality. He was aging, rapidly but not catastrophically, his body catching up to what it should have been, finding equilibrium between the immortal and the mortal. The witch shrieked in fury as the curse shattered, the sound like breaking glass echoing through dimensions. The other Lycans scattered, released from the compulsion that had drawn them, and Lucius collapsed into Ravenna's arms, his transformation complete. He was fully human now, still strong, still powerful, but mortal, breakable, real. She held him as he gasped for breath, as 3 centuries of supernatural existence drained away, leaving behind a man who looked to be in his early 40s, his long black hair now streaked with silver, his face bearing the weight of the years he had truly lived. He looked up at her with eyes that were clear and amber, and entirely his own. "I chose you," he said simply. "I will always choose you." The days that followed were a time of adjustment and wonder. Lucius had to learn what it meant to be mortal again, to feel fatigue, to need sleep, to understand that his body now had limits. But he embraced it with a joy that Ravana found beautiful to witness. He reveled in simple things he had forgotten mattered. The way food tasted when you were truly hungry, the satisfaction of rest after a day's work, the knowledge that time was precious because it was no longer infinite. He ruled his kingdom still, but with a new perspective, understanding his people in ways he had not been able to when he stood apart from them as an immortal. And through it all, Ravana was beside him, his queen in all but name, though he insisted on making that official with a wedding that brought together creatures from every corner of the realm. The ceremony took place in the great hall of Blackmoor Castle, the same place where Lucius had first claimed her as his own. But now there was no darkness, no fear, only light streaming through windows that had been opened to let in the spring air. Lucius stood at the altar in formal attire, his long hair pulled back, his beard trimmed but still present, looking every inch the king despite his mortality. When Ravenna appeared in a gown of white and gold, her blonde hair woven with winter flowers, his breath caught audibly, and several people in attendance swore they saw tears in the fearsome king's eyes. She walked to him alone, needing no one to give her away, because this choice was hers, and hers alone. When she took his hands, when she looked up into his face, and saw nothing but love and devotion reflected back at her, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. I, Lucius Gravesend, take you, Ravana Ironheart, to be my wife, my queen, my heart made flesh. I vow to protect you with my strength, to cherish you with my soul, to love you with every breath in this mortal body, for as long as I draw air. You saw the man when the world saw only the beast. You stayed when you could have run. You loved me when I had forgotten how to love myself. I am yours, now and always. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled as he held hers, and Ravana felt her own tears fall freely. I, Ravenna Ironheart, take you, Lucius Gravesend, to be my husband, my king, my home. I vow to stand beside you in strength and in vulnerability, to be your comfort and your challenger, to love you fiercely and without reservation for all our days. You showed me that true strength lies not in dominion, but in devotion, not in conquest, but in connection. I am yours, now and always. When they kissed to seal their vows, the entire hall erupted in celebration, but the two of them were lost in their own world. Lucius held her as if she were made of starlight and dreams, his lips moving from her mouth to her temple, to her cheek, murmuring words of love and promise against her skin. My wife, he said, wonder coloring his rough voice. My Ravenna, after 300 years of darkness, you brought me back to the light. She smiled against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady and human beneath her ear. And you taught me that true love is not about finding someone who completes you, but about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. Someone worth choosing every day, in every moment, for as long as we have. Their life together was not without challenges. Being queen to a king who was adjusting to mortality while still leading a kingdom of supernatural creatures required strength and wisdom that Ravana had to learn day by day. There were political conflicts, threats from neighboring territories, internal disputes that tested both her resolve and Lucius's patience. But they faced everything together, a united front that became legendary throughout the realm. And in private, away from the demands of court and crown, they built a life filled with small, precious moments. Morning walks through the gardens, where Lucius still cultivated his rare plants. Evenings by the fire where they read to each other, or simply sat in comfortable silence. Nights where he held her with a tenderness that never ceased to take her breath away, where he worshipped her with hands and lips, and whispered words of devotion. Their first true test as a married couple came during a harsh winter, when famine threatened the outer villages. Resources were scarce, and difficult decisions had to be made about distribution and rationing. Lucius approached it with his typical strategic mind, calculating how to preserve the most lives with limited supplies. But Ravenna saw beyond the numbers to the human cost, the families who would be left behind, the children who would go hungry. They clashed over it, their first real argument, both passionate in their positions. He accused her of letting emotion cloud judgment. She accused him of letting strategy override compassion. The fight was heated, voices raised in a way they had never been before, and it ended with Lucius storming from the room, frustrated and uncertain. It would have been easy for pride to keep them apart, for stubbornness to create a rift. But that night, unable to sleep without her beside him, Lucius returned to their chambers and found Ravenna awake as well, sitting by the window with tears on her cheeks. The sight of her crying undid him completely. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, apologies tumbling from his lips. "I am sorry," he said roughly. "I am so sorry. I should have listened better. Should have seen what you were seeing instead of dismissing it." She turned in his embrace, her hands clutching at his shirt. "And I am sorry, too," she whispered. "I know you carry the weight of every decision, that you cannot save everyone no matter how much you want to. I should not have made it sound like you did not care." They held each other in the darkness, both humbled, both learning. The next morning, they presented a unified plan to the council, one that blended Lucius's strategic thinking with Ravenna's compassion, finding creative solutions that neither had seen alone. It worked. The villages survived the winter, and the kingdom saw what true partnership looked like. Not the absence of conflict, but the willingness to work through it, to compromise without compromising their values, to emerge stronger from the struggle. As the years passed, they developed rhythms and traditions that became the foundation of their shared life. Every morning, Lucius would wake before dawn and spend a few moments simply watching Ravenna sleep, still amazed that she was his, that she had stayed, that she continued to choose him day after day. When she woke, she would find him already dressed, a cup of tea waiting for her on the bedside table, prepared exactly how she liked it. They would breakfast together in their private chambers, discussing the day ahead, sharing observations and concerns, planning both separately and jointly. Then they would part for their duties, but throughout the day, they found ways to connect. A shared look during a council meeting that said, "I wish we were alone." A brush of hands in passing that conveyed, "I am thinking of you." A note sent via servant, with nothing but "I love you," written in his bold handwriting or her elegant script. Ravenna established herself as a force within the kingdom, not content to be merely a decorative queen. She created a network of informants among the common people, not spies exactly, but trusted individuals who kept her informed of the true conditions beyond the castle walls. She used this knowledge to advocate for reforms, pushing Lucius to see problems he might not have otherwise noticed, lending her voice to those who had none. She mediated disputes with a fairness that earned respect even from those who ruled against. She instituted programs for education, believing that an informed populace was a strong populace. And through it all, Lucius supported her, sometimes challenging her approaches, but always defending her right to pursue them, making it clear to everyone that questioning his queen's authority was the same as questioning his own. But Ravenna also learned the darker necessities of ruling. There was a plot against Lucius, a conspiracy involving several nobles who believed the king had grown weak since his mortality, that he could now be overthrown and replaced. The evidence was irrefutable, the treason clear. Lucius prepared to execute the traitors publicly, as was his right and the kingdom's law. But Ravenna struggled with it, knowing that among the conspirators was a young man barely older than 20, led astray by older, more cunning nobles. She went to Lucius privately, pleading for mercy for the boy, arguing that he deserved a chance at redemption. Lucius listened, his expression grim, and then took her hand and led her to the window overlooking the courtyard where people went about their daily lives. "If I show mercy to traitors," he said quietly, "it sends a message that treason is survivable. Others will try, emboldened by my softness, and in the attempt, innocent people like those down there, will die. Is the life of one foolish boy worth the lives of dozens of innocent citizens?" Ravenna felt the weight of his words, the impossible calculus of leadership. "But there must be a balance," she insisted, "between justice and mercy, between strength and compassion. He is young, Lucius. He can still change. We can make an example of the others while offering him a different path. They debated late into the night and finally reached a compromise. The older conspirators would face the full penalty of their treason. The young man would be given a choice: death or a life of service to the kingdom, working in the villages he had endangered, seeing firsthand the cost of the instability he had helped create. If he proved himself over years of faithful service, he might eventually earn a pardon. It was not a perfect solution, and it satisfied neither complete justice nor complete mercy, but it was what they could both live with. The young man chose service, and years later, he would become one of the kingdom's most dedicated advocates for the common people. His early mistake transformed into lifelong devotion. Lucius never forgot the lesson of that moment, how Ravena's insistence on finding another way had ultimately strengthened the kingdom rather than weakening it. And Ravenna learned that sometimes love meant supporting difficult decisions, that protecting people sometimes required hardness she wished was not necessary. The duality that had first drawn Ravenna to him never faded. In the council room, Lucius remained every inch the fierce king, his voice cold and commanding when dealing with threats, his decisions swift and absolute when justice demanded it. He showed no mercy to those who would harm his people, no hesitation in doing what needed to be done to protect his kingdom. His reputation as a ruler to be feared and respected only grew with time. But with her, he was endlessly gentle. With her, he smiled freely and laughed without reservation. With her, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to share his fears and doubts, to admit when he was tired or uncertain. He brought her breakfast in bed when she was unwell, braided her hair when she asked, held her through nightmares, and told her daily that she was his entire world made real. The contrast was stark and beautiful, and Ravenna never tired of being the only one who got to see every facet of the man she loved. There were moments of pure joy that sustained them through the harder times. The first snowfall of one particularly harsh winter, when Lucius surprised her by leading her outside and engaging in a snowball fight with an enthusiasm that made her laugh until her sides ached. The time she convinced him to dance with her in the ballroom late at night, just the two of them. No music but what they hummed, spinning and swaying and falling over each other's feet because he insisted he could not dance despite 3 centuries of life. The morning she woke feeling ill, and he spent the entire day by her side, reading to her, bringing her soup he had insisted on making himself despite the cook's protests, refusing to leave even when she told him he had important meetings. "I am exactly where I need to be," he had said firmly, and she had fallen in love with him all over again. These moments, strung together like pearls on a thread, created a life that was rich and full and deeply, profoundly meaningful. The duality that had first drawn Ravenna to him never faded. In the council room, Lucius remained every inch the fierce king, his voice cold and commanding when dealing with threats, his decisions swift and absolute when justice demanded it. He showed no mercy to those who would harm his people, no hesitation in doing what needed to be done to protect his kingdom. His reputation as a ruler to be feared and respected only grew with time. But with her, he was endlessly gentle. With her, he smiled freely and laughed without reservation. With her, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to share his fears and doubts, to admit when he was tired or uncertain. He brought her breakfast in bed when she was unwell, braided her hair when she asked, held her through nightmares, and told her daily that she was his entire world, made real. The contrast was stark and beautiful, and Ravenna never tired of being the only one who got to see every facet of the man she loved. Years passed, measured now in seasons and celebrations rather than endless centuries. They welcomed 2 children into the world, a daughter with Ravenna's golden hair and Lucius's fierce amber eyes, and a son with his father's dark features and his mother's gentle heart. Lucius was a devoted father, firm but loving, teaching his children to be strong and kind in equal measure. Watching him with their children, seeing the way he could be stern one moment and playful the next, Ravenna fell in love with him all over again. He was building a legacy now, not of fear and power, but of family and love, and the kind of strength that came from connection rather than isolation. Their children grew up knowing their father's story, understanding the choice he had made and why, learning that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to choose love despite it. The birth of their daughter, Elara, had been a transformative experience for both of them. Lucius had been terrified, pacing the corridors like a caged animal while Ravenna labored, his centuries of experience utterly useless in the face of this very human vulnerability. When the midwife finally called him in and placed the tiny, squalling infant in his arms, he had frozen, staring down at the small life with an expression of wonder and terror. "She is so small," he whispered, his voice breaking. "What if I hurt her? What if the beast comes out and I cannot control it?" Ravenna, exhausted but radiant, had reached out to touch his hand, where it supported their daughter's head. "You will not," she said with absolute certainty. "You controlled the beast for me. You will control it for her. And you did not come this far, fight this hard, become this man, to fail now. Trust yourself, Lucius. Trust the father you are going to be." He had cried then, tears falling freely as he looked between his wife and his daughter, overcome by the realization that he had helped create this perfect, precious life, that after 300 years of destruction and darkness, he had brought something beautiful into the world. From that moment, Elara owned him completely. He was wrapped around her tiny finger from the first breath she took. As she grew, he proved to be a surprisingly patient father, answering endless questions with thoughtfulness, teaching her to read using the same ancient texts he cherished, showing her how to care for his beloved plants. But he was also protective to a fault, and Ravenna often had to intervene when his fear for Elara's safety threatened to become stifling. "She is not made of glass," Ravenna would remind him gently. "She needs space to explore, to fall and learn to get back up, to become her own person." And Lucius would take a breath, force himself to step back, though it cost him dearly. Their son Kieran arrived 3 years after Elara, and where his sister was all fire and fierce determination, he was thoughtful and empathetic. Lucius initially struggled with Kieran's gentle nature, worried that the boy would be seen as weak in a world that often valued strength above all else. But Ravenna helped him see that Kieran's compassion was not weakness, but a different kind of strength, one that would serve him well as a leader if he chose that path. "Watch him with the servants," she told Lucius one day. "See how they light up when he asks about their families, how he remembers details about their lives. See how he mediates disputes between his sister and the other children, finding solutions that leave everyone feeling heard. That is power, Lucius. The power to bring people together, to make them feel valued. Never underestimate it." Lucius observed his son with new eyes after that conversation, and began to appreciate the gifts Kieran possessed, even if they were different from his own. The family dinners they shared became sacred time, a respite from the demands of ruling. Lucius would set aside his crown, Ravenna her queenly duties, and they would simply be parents, laughing at Elara's dramatic retellings of her day, listening to Kieran's philosophical questions about the nature of justice and fairness. These moments grounded them, reminded them of what they were building, what they were protecting. And in the laughter of their children, in the simple joy of family, Lucius found a peace he had never imagined possible. "I never thought I would have this," he confessed to Ravenna one night after they had tucked both children into bed. "A family, children who carry my blood but not my curse, a home that feels like sanctuary rather than prison. You gave me this. You gave me everything." But parenting also brought its challenges and disagreements. When Elara expressed interest in combat training at age 10, Lucius was immediately supportive, proud of his daughter's warrior spirit. But when she came home with bruises from particularly vigorous sparring sessions, something in him broke. He stormed to the training grounds and dismissed her instructor, declaring that his daughter would not be treated roughly. Ravenna had to intervene, sitting him down and explaining that sheltering Elara from the realities of combat would only make her weaker, more vulnerable. "She wants this," Ravenna said firmly. "She needs to learn properly, which means learning through real challenges. You cannot protect her from everything, Lucius, and trying to will only drive her away." It was one of their rare, serious arguments, born from his protective instincts, clashing with her understanding of what their daughter needed. They compromised eventually, with Lucius personally overseeing some of Alara's training, channeling his fear into ensuring she learned the right way, from someone who cared about her safety as much as her skill. Similarly, when Kieran struggled with the expectations placed on him as a prince, the pressure to be more aggressive, more commanding, Ravana had to stop Lucius from intervening too forcefully. "Let him find his own path," she urged. "Not every leader rules the way you do. Some lead through inspiration rather than command, through building consensus rather than issuing decrees. Kieran will find his way, but only if we give him the space to discover who he is rather than trying to mold him into who we think he should be." It went against every protective instinct Lucius possessed, but he trusted Ravina's wisdom in matters of emotional intelligence. Together, they learned to parent as a team, balancing each other's strengths and compensating for each other's blind spots, showing their children what true partnership looked like. One evening, after the children had been put to bed and the castle had settled into its nighttime quiet, Ravana found Lucius on the battlements where they had shared their first real conversation all those years ago. His hair was more silver than black now, his face bearing the lines of a life well lived, but he was still as striking as the day she had first seen him. She joined him at the wall, and he immediately wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against the cool night air. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Giving up immortality? Choosing this life?" Lucius looked down at her with such love in his eyes that her breath caught. "Even after all this time. Every single day," he said, and her heart seized until he continued. "I regret that I did not meet you 300 years ago, so I could have had more time with you. I regret that our years together will not be infinite, but I have never, not for one moment, regretted choosing you. Choosing this. Mortality is not a curse, Ravana. Immortality was. Because what is life without someone to share it with? What is time without meaning? You gave me back my humanity, and with it, you gave me back my soul." Ravana pressed her face into his chest, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his mortal heart. "And you gave me a love that defied destiny, that chose connection over conquest, vulnerability over invincibility. You showed me that the strongest man is not the one who never bends, but the one who knows when to yield." Lucius tilted her face up to his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. "I yielded to you the moment I saw you," he said quietly. "I just did not realize it yet. My fierce little queen, you conquered me without raising a weapon, claimed me without force. You simply loved me, and that was enough. That was everything." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. A kiss that tasted of years shared and years yet to come, of mornings waking up together and evenings watching the sun set, of laughter and tears, and all the messy, beautiful moments that made a life worth living. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms beneath a sky full of stars, Ravana thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had come to Blackmoor Castle a sacrifice, an offering to appease a monster. She had found instead a man desperate to remember how to be human, a soul crying out for connection in a world that had taught him only isolation. Together, they had broken a curse that had lasted 3 centuries. Together, they had built a love that would be sung about for generations. But more than that, they had found in each other what every heart secretly seeks: a home, a haven, a place to be fully, completely, unequivocally themselves. The cursed Lycan king had taken one look at Ravana Ironheart and growled a command that changed the course of destiny. "She's mine," and she was. But he was hers as well, in all the ways that mattered. Heart and soul, strength and vulnerability, beast and man. They belonged to each other in that profound way that transcends magic and time, that defies logic and reason. They belonged to each other the way the moon belongs to the night, the way waves belong to the shore. Inevitable, eternal, absolutely and irrevocably bound. In the years that followed, their story became legend. Bards sang of the cursed king who chose love over power, of the golden-haired queen who saw past the monster to the man. They sang of a love that broke ancient magic, that transformed darkness into light, that proved mercy was mightier than strength and vulnerability more powerful than invincibility. But the songs, beautiful as they were, could never truly capture what Ravena and Lucius knew in their bones. That love is not about grand gestures and dramatic proclamations, though those have their place. Love is about choosing someone every single day. It is about holding them when they break and celebrating them when they soar. It is about seeing every flaw and loving them not despite those imperfections, but because of them, because they make up the whole of the person you cherish. There were hard times still, because life is not a fairy tale, and happy endings are not the end of the story, but merely the beginning of a new chapter. They faced losses, as all mortals must. Friends aged and passed, battles were fought and sometimes lost, difficult decisions had to be made that cost them sleep and peace. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. When Lucius was weary from the weight of leadership, Ravena was his strength. When she doubted herself, he was her certainty. They built each other up, supported each other's growth, challenged each other to be better while loving each other exactly as they were. It was not always easy, but it was always worth it. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Lucius surprised Ravena with a gift. He led her to the gardens, to a section that had been closed off for months, and when she stepped through the gate, her breath caught in wonder. He had created an entire garden of night-blooming flowers, the same ones that had surrounded them the first time he kissed her. In the center was a fountain, and carved into the stone were words that made her eyes fill with tears. Here stands a monument to the day I stopped merely existing and started truly living. The day I met you. The day I learned that even a beast can be saved by love. Ravena turned to him, seeing the love shining in his eyes, the silver in his hair catching the moonlight, and she had never loved him more than in that moment. I would do it all again, Lucius said, taking her hands in his. Every moment of darkness, every year of the curse, every second of pain, I would endure it all again if it meant finding you at the end. You are my redemption, Ravena, my salvation, my everything. She pulled him close, kissing him with all the passion and tenderness of their years together. And you are mine, she whispered against his lips. My impossible, wonderful, fierce, gentle love. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for teaching me that true strength lies in opening your heart, not closing it off. Thank you for being exactly who you are. They danced in that garden of night-blooming flowers, with no music but the wind and their own heartbeats, with no witnesses but the stars. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love when the world offered power, who had built a life on trust and devotion and unwavering commitment. The cursed Lycan king and his queen, no longer bound by magic, but forever bound by choice. And as they swayed together in the moonlight, time seemed to slow, to hold its breath, as if the universe itself was acknowledging the beauty of what they had created. Their children grew and had children of their own, and Lucius and Ravena became grandparents, delighting in the new generation that carried their legacy forward. They watched their family expand, their kingdom prosper, their love story become the foundation upon which others built their own hopes and dreams. And through it all, through every season and every change, they remained each other's constant. The fierce king who was gentle only with her, the golden-haired queen who had tamed a beast with compassion rather than force. Partners in every sense of the word, equal and complementary, two halves of a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. As the years continued their inevitable march, Lucius's mortality became more apparent. His steps grew slower, his body less quick to heal, his need for rest more frequent. But he never complained, never mourned the immortality he had surrendered, because every ache, every pain, every sign of aging was proof that he was alive, truly alive, in a way he had not been for 3 centuries. And Ravena was with him through all of it, her own body showing the gentle marks of time, her golden hair threaded with white, her face bearing the soft lines of a life filled with laughter and tears and love. They aged together, grew older side by side, and there was a profound beauty in that shared journey that no magic could replicate. There were days when Lucius would wake and spend long moments simply looking at Ravenna sleeping beside him, studying the changes time had wrought. The fine lines around her eyes, earned from years of smiling and laughing. The silver strands woven through her golden hair like threads of moonlight. The way her hand, now showing the delicate blue of veins beneath skin that had lost some of its youthful elasticity, still fit perfectly in his. Each change was a testament to their shared life, a physical record of every joy and sorrow they had experienced together. He would trace these changes with gentle fingers, marveling that he got to witness them, that he had been given the gift of growing old alongside someone he loved. "I used to fear aging," he told her once on a quiet morning. "When I was immortal, I watched everyone around me wither while I remained unchanged. It was a special kind of torture, being frozen while the world moved on. But this, growing old with you, it is the greatest privilege of my life." Ravenna understood his wonder because she felt it too, though from a different perspective. She had grown up hearing stories of the immortal Lycan king, this being who existed outside of time, unchangeable and eternal. To witness him experience mortality, to see him discover the beauty in limitation, in the preciousness of finite time, was its own kind of magic. She loved the silver in his hair, the way it made him look distinguished rather than old. She loved the deeper lines around his eyes, evidence of laughter they had shared. She loved the way his body, while still strong, had softened slightly, becoming more comfortable, more lived in. These changes did not diminish him in her eyes. They made him more real, more human, more hers. "We are works in progress," she told him, "right up until the very end. And I would not trade a single moment of this progression for eternal youth, because youth without wisdom is wasted, and beauty without depth is empty. We have earned these lines and silver hairs, Lucius. They are our badges of honor." One quiet afternoon, as they sat together in their private chambers, Lucius's head in Ravenna's lap as she ran her fingers through his silver-streaked hair, he looked up at her with eyes that still burned with the same intensity they had held the day he first claimed her as his. "I need you to know," he said quietly, "that you were worth it. All of it. Every sacrifice, every difficulty, every moment of uncertainty. You were worth it all and more. If I had 1,000 lifetimes, I would spend every single one of them finding you, choosing you, loving you." Ravenna felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, of completion, of a love so profound it could not be contained by mere mortal forms. "And I would spend every lifetime letting you," she said softly, "loving you back, building this beautiful life with you over and over again." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and they sat together in the fading light, wrapped in each other's presence. Outside, the kingdom continued its rhythms, people living and loving and pursuing their own destinies. But in that chamber, time held still for two souls who had found in each other everything they had ever needed. The cursed Lycan king had long ago transformed from a beast into a man, but the final transformation was this: from a man who ruled alone to a man who lived and loved completely, his heart full, his soul at peace, his existence no longer a curse, but a blessing. Their story did not end with death, though death would eventually come for them as it does for all mortals. Their story ended with life, with the simple, profound truth that they had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. They had broken a curse not just with magic, but with the most powerful force in any universe. Two people choosing each other, again and again and again, through every trial and triumph, every joy and sorrow, every sunrise and sunset. They had proven that love is not about perfection, but about persistence, not about never falling, but about always choosing to rise together. And so the legend spread, carried on the lips of those who had witnessed their love, passed down through generations who drew strength from knowing that even the darkest curse can be broken. Even the loneliest soul can find home. Even the fiercest beast can learn to love. The tale of the cursed Lycan king who took one look at a golden-haired woman and knew, with absolute certainty, that she was his. And the brave, Compassionate queen who looked past the monster to see the man, who chose love when offered power, who stood firm when the whole world trembled. Together, they had written a story for the ages, a testament to the transformative power of true love. Their influence rippled far beyond their own lifetimes. The kingdom they built together became known throughout the realm as a place where justice was tempered with mercy, where strength was balanced by compassion, where people were valued not for their power, but for their character. Other rulers sought to emulate their model, asking how they had created such loyalty among their people, such prosperity amid challenges, such unity amid diversity. The answer was always the same. They had ruled not from a place of fear, but from a place of love. Not love as weakness, but love as the strongest foundation upon which to build anything lasting. They had shown that a leader could be both fierce and gentle, could make hard decisions without losing their humanity, could command respect without demanding submission through terror. The programs Ravenna had instituted flourished and expanded. The education system she had championed produced generations of thinkers and innovators who pushed the kingdom forward. The justice reforms she had advocated for created a more equitable society where even the poorest citizen had recourse against injustice. The partnerships she had built with neighboring territories transformed the region from a patchwork of suspicious rivals into a network of trading partners and allies. And through it all, Lucius had supported her vision while contributing his own wisdom, his centuries of experience informing their decisions, his strength backing her initiatives. They were, in every sense, partners in both love and leadership, each making the other better, each compensating for the other's blind spots, each amplifying the other's strengths. In the end, that is what we all seek, is it not? To be seen, to be chosen, to be loved not in spite of our darkness, but because someone sees the light we carry within it, to find someone who brings out the best in us while accepting the worst, to build something lasting with another soul, to create meaning from the chaos of existence, to know that when we leave this world, we leave it having mattered to someone, having been loved, and having loved in return. Lucius and Ravenna found this, and in finding it, they became more than a king and queen, more than characters in a story. They became a symbol of hope, proof that redemption is possible, that transformation is real, that love, when given freely and received wholly, can indeed conquer all. The castle still stands centuries later, a monument to their love. The gardens still bloom with night-flowering plants. And on quiet evenings when the moon is full and the stars are bright, some swear they can hear the echo of laughter, the whisper of promises spoken long ago, the rustle of a dance shared between two souls who found in each other everything they ever needed. The cursed Lycan king and his queen, forever bound not by magic but by choice, not by destiny but by devotion, not by curse but by the most powerful force in any realm. Love that sees beyond the surface. Love that chooses the person over the power. Love that endures because it is built on truth and trust, and the simple, profound act of showing up for each other, day after day, year after year, lifetime after lifetime. And that, perhaps, is the true magic. Not spells or curses or supernatural transformations, but the quiet miracle of two hearts recognizing each other across a crowded room, across centuries of darkness, across every obstacle and challenge. The miracle of choosing each other and building a life together, one moment, one day, one loving act at a time. The miracle of becoming more yourself because you are loved for who you truly are. This is what Ravenna and Lucius discovered, and this is the legacy they left behind. Not just a kingdom, not just descendants, but the enduring truth that love, real love, changes everything. It breaks curses. It heals wounds. It transforms beasts into men and loneliness into belonging. It is, and always will be, the greatest magic of all. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.